how to use ChatGPT to produce better qualitative research. And I'm going to emphasize the better in this process. So I'm going to be talking about 3 levels of qualitative information. The lowest level, some would argue, is not qualitative at all, which is to take qualitative information and turn it into quantitative information. For example, coding, things like that we've done for many, many years. It is a good use of qualitative information. I'm not sure I'd call it qualitative analysis. The second level I want to talk about is really for non-qual researchers or people at the early part of their career using ChatGPT or similar to summarize the information. But then I'm going to talk about using proper research methods to analyze the information in ways that we normally can't do because of time constraints. I'm going to be using 2 examples. One is based on open-ended survey responses. The second one is based on a transcript from a focus group. So here's the survey responses. It's a study that I ran for New MR. We were talking to people about how they're using artificial intelligence. I can load all that data up into ChatGPT by clicking on the paperclip. It then loads it up. I've loaded it up from an Excel file. My first question is, okay, tell me about the questions that are actually in this file, because I'm in this convert mode at the moment. And I've highlighted in blue. ChatGPT did not highlight this. I highlighted it in blue. Looking forward 2 years, what impact do you think that AI will have on research and insights? So my first question as part of this convert is I say to ChatGPT, conduct a cluster analysis of the comments in question 14 and describe the clusters. And it does that, and it tells me that there's a group of people who are cautiously optimistic. There are a group of people who are talking about integration challenges. There are a group of people who are talking all about efficiency and automation. And there are a group of people who just talk about it's going to be big. What do you think is going to happen over the next years? Oh, it's going to be immense. It's going to be enormous. Things like that. So I ask it, well, how many people fit into each of those groups? And it shows me that in this particular data set that we've got 151 in the cautious optimism, all the way down to 46 people into this significant impact stage. One of my first checks, and you've heard a lot about hallucinations, so I'm checking all the way through this process, is I'm going to see if that count number adds up to the number of people I've got. That's always a good check. Then I ask it to create a data table with these open-ended responses and the cluster memberships, and then add another column to the table that says whether the prediction is better, worse, or the same as the current situation. And I want it to export that as an Excel file. And when I do that, I get an Excel file that looks like this. On the left-hand side, I have the original comments. I can back check against my input file. They are still there. I have the cluster names. I can do a bit of spot checking. And we have this sort of sentiment analysis. Who thinks things are going to be better, worse, or unclear? And we can do a lot of that sort of convert. And there is a case for that. But it's not, as I say, really where qual is at. So let's now go forward and think about summarize. So I can ask ChatGPT to summarize the information in the question we're analyzing. What are the key predictions, hopes, and concerns? And so it looks at that question 14 and it comes up with the predictions: increased efficiency, enhanced accuracy and capabilities, greater integration with existing practices. It hopes, when it analyzes what everybody was saying, it says there are 3 hopes: cost reduction and faster turnaround, improvement in data quality and insights, and democratization of research. It then comes back with the concerns: over-reliance on technology, ethical and bias issues, job displacement, hype and unrealistic expectations. And if I were just working at the summarize level, one of the things that I would be doing is for each one of these, say, show me a quote. And I back check the quote really exists. There have been people who've reported ChatGPT generating quotes. I've not had that in the last few months. I did see it in the early days, but it's a good check when it generates a quote for you, just to go back and make sure that it is really there. So We've got a quantitative use of qualitative information. We've got a nice thing to do if really you're a quant researcher and you just want a summary of what that information says, or you're not really a researcher and you're using, say, a survey monkey to gather some data, and you shouldn't be pushing your analysis too far. But now I'm talking to real quantitative analysts and researchers out there, because I will tell ChatGPT to use content analysis to analyze the questions, to explore the key stories that describe the different predictions for the impact of AI on the research industry, insights industry. And I've chosen content analysis for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's algorithmic, and most of the advanced qualitative analytic techniques are extremely algorithmic. They have very clear steps. There are lots and lots of books that have written up how to do the process, and that has been the learning that the LLMs have had. The second is content analysis is the most like the quantitative, so I know that it should replicate what I saw from the quantitative pretty closely. And it tells me that the key stories and narratives are about automation and job displacement, advancement in data integrity, integration complexity, ethical bias and challenges, and cultural adaptation to AI. So we can see more information coming out here than we saw in that simple quant approach. But my next step is to say, now apply the technique of grounded theory. And before I started using ChatGPT, I only ever used one method of analysis. That one method might be content analysis, it might be discourse analysis, it might be narrative. But on any one project, I only ever used one technique. And I never used grounded theory except when I was doing my master's. We use this in the academic world because it's great, but it takes forever to do it with a human. Now I can ask ChatGPT to run that evolutionary impact on research. It comes back with a theory explanation of what's going on, much more cultural underpinning. So I then use a technique, you're going to see me do this 2 or 3 times in this presentation for contrast. So I start off by saying, what are the key points of agreement between these two very different analyses of the same information? And it comes back with 5 categories. 3 of them I've spelled out on the screen. Automation efficiency comes back with both of them. Economic impact and job concerns comes back. The ethical bias and issues come back, along with cultural and skill shifts, integration challenges. That's interesting. It's what I would have seen anyway from just doing the process. This is a more interesting question. List any different conclusions that are suggested by the 2 analyses. On job displacement, the content analysis talked about job displacement, direct result of automation. Grounded theory suggests deeper causal relationship where job displacement is part of a broader economic impact, also involves changes in skill requirements, could be mitigated by certain types of AI applications. On the ethical issues, content analysis simply told us that it cropped up quite a lot. Grounded theory offers the ethical concerns are fundamentally connected to the types of AI being deployed, the cultural readiness of organizations to handle these technologies, suggesting specific strategies for ethical integration of AI. As part of understanding what's going on and part of checking that it's actually valid and making sense, I will do this quite a few times. In terms of the difference about job displacement, show me quotes that support the grounded theory view and quotes that support the content analysis view. So the content analysis talks very much about it's going to do these routine tasks, there's going to be job losses. The grounded theory talks about manual data processing, shift in types of skills, potentially leading for those who are not adept with the new technologies. A second quote comes through. Again, talk about the ethical oversight, suggesting a shift rather than a simple reduction in workforce. So we're getting this 2 levels coming through between the 2. So that's looking at simple open-ended information. The next case I'm going to show you is looking at focus groups. Now, none of my clients will let me share the content of focus groups. So this one is taken from an online study that was published. The study was conducted in 2011. It was conducted with women aged 18 to 25 who regularly wear makeup and who could speak and understand English. The study was conducted in Singapore. With this transcript, it's about 14 pages. I could do it pretty much as quickly by hand, except for some of the deeper analysis I'm going to talk about. But I ran this through the machine. But if I had 6 transcripts from 2 moderators in 2 countries, then I would really need this sort of ChatGPT approach. So I've got this transcript. I didn't do the research. I'm asked to do some analysis on it. The first thing I'm going to ask ChatGPT is how many people? And it reads through the transcripts and says, okay, there's a moderator with the initials DL, and then there are participants A to F. And in the transcript, they have been given the name Gina, Gladys, Yongqi, etc. I don't know if those are real names. I would hope not, since it's a published study. The next question I can ask is describe the 6 focus group attendees in terms of their views about makeup. So rather than as a human, I would start at the top of the transcript and I would read down. I can change the way I do my thinking and my questioning and say, start off by doing a pencil portrait for me of these 6 people. And it comes back and it tells me, here are 3 of them. Then it showed me the other 3 about their makeup habits, their views on beauty, their attitude towards makeup. So I've got a bit of context now for moving into this analysis. What are the main points of agreement between the 6 women? Enhancement of natural beauty. They all wear makeup as a confidence booster. They all talk about inner beauty associated with happiness and confidence, and some practical concerns. Again, a more interesting question, where is the disagreement or the dissonance across the discussions? Okay, so we get a difference of perception of beauty and makeup, the balance of the inner beauty and the outer beauty. Is makeup essential or optional? Confidence dependency. For some of them, it was a confidence booster. For some of them, it was essential to their confidence. And in frequency, some use it more often, some use it daily, some use it lightly. So I start to move into the analysis mode. My client wants to understand how to promote a brand of cosmetics to women in Singapore. Which qualitative analysis methods are the most likely to give actionable advice from this data to help with this question? For example, narrative analysis, grounded theory, content analysis, or others. And it comes back with a description of 3 possible methods: narrative analysis, grounded theory, content. So it's only suggested the ones I suggested to it. They're all valid suggestions. But I say, what other methods should I consider? And it comes back with thematic analysis and discourse analysis. Yep, I'm a lot happier now. Given that I've got these transcripts and I've got no other material, I don't have the videos, I didn't run the interviews, I've got no previous data to this. Which 2 methods would you suggest for my analysis? And it comes back with thematic analysis and content analysis. And I quite like that balance. As I mentioned before, content is very factual. It's going to tell you a lot about what was said most often. Thematic is going to be focusing more on the messages in the information rather than just which words and terms we use more often. Given my client wants to understand how to promote their brand of cosmetics, please analyze this transcript with content analysis and make recommendations for my client. Comes up with the content analysis, looks at what's going on, preferences for natural beauty, makeup as a confidence booster, concerns about skin health. I repeat that with the thematic analysis and I get similar but slightly different. Natural and subtle beauty is coming through. Cosmetics as a tool for confidence. We can see these are now more cultural, more societal use of the information. Where do they come to the same conclusion? And one of the responses was both analyses found that makeup is often used as a tool to boost confidence, with participants feeling more presentable and assured when wearing makeup. Show me 2 quotes that illustrate this. And so here we are. So Gladys comes forward as a nice quote on this point. Actually, I'm okay. It's just maybe a bit sleepy. But when I put on makeup, I feel more awake and confident. It's like you don't want to go out feeling like you're not ready to face the day. Makeup helps me feel prepared and like I can handle whatever comes. And so we can build through that process. We keep looking at the actual quotes to get a sense of what's going on. That's been a really fast run through the process, but I'm going to just highlight some caveats. I still speed read the material before analyzing it. So I would have gone through the 14 pages of that. I don't go back to check what I've read carefully. I'm reading it very quickly, but I want to know when I see what's coming out of the AI that it's got the same feel that I had. I'm going to ask it to show me quotes to support its findings and to check they're real. And I'm going to use questions based on triangulation to assess its validity. There are things I already know about the market. They should be answerable from the data. Asking the same question another way around should give me the similar sort of insight. One of the things we can do, I talked about better research. If you've never used grounded theory and you want to learn more about it, you can log into ChatGPT and ask it to create a grounded theory course for you. Then you can ask it to generate a test piece of text and show you how to step-by-step analyze that text. And then you can ask it to create a set of questions that will show if you've understood the material. You can set it up to give you like multi-choice questions, and then it's going to tell you whether you're right or wrong. Or you can set it up to give you an individual question. So here is a piece of text. Which are the key codes that I should identify in it? You would tell it which codes you've identified. It will tell you whether you're right. And if you're not right, it can tell you which ways you should change what you're doing. So it can specifically take your skills, be that semiotics, be that grounded theory, be that narrative analysis, and boost them so that not only are you using the computer to be much faster, but you actually have a broader set of backgrounds yourself. Once we trust the analysis of generative AI, and I am not there yet, I'm still using it, as Ben said earlier, as an assistant, we can ask it to work with really large bodies of text and images and video. Imagine hundreds of online discussions where it's going through and it's interpreting it and it's not turning it into numbers. So yes, it can convert it into numerical to track sentiment, but it can summarize it, including by group. So what are the promoters? What are the non-users? What are the regions? What the demographics tend to think? But also conducting what I call real analysis, like the thematic analysis, contrasting that with content analysis so we get a better understanding of what's in the information. That's what I mean by faster, bigger, and better. So thank you very much. And I look forward to any questions you may have. Really important question. How far do you go in data checking with ChatGPT? My experience, even with the newer models for us, it still cannot accurately quantify the analysis. Okay, a bit of a technical response. If you want to quantify information, you need to be making sure that it's using the code interpreter, which calls Python code. And that Python code will almost invariably be correct Python code implemented the right way. It's never going to be wholly accurate. If you ask it to do sentiment analysis, it will use leading sentiment analysis algorithms, and they will get it about 95% right. So you can see individual cases. With quantifying the data, that doesn't matter. If you say that people are 75% positive, and in fact they're 80% positive or 70% positive, that's as good as it's going to be when you're converting that sort of qualitative information into quant. So you need the code interpreter turned on when you're doing quantitative. You need to tell ChatGPT not to use the code interpreter when it's summarizing data, when it's using grounded theory, when it's using narrative analysis. You absolutely want it to be using the large language model. So you're trying to use two different features of ChatGPT when you're doing this analysis. And how far do you go with the checking? So it's rather like when I'm checking a junior researcher, I check the marginals. So do the rows add up? Do the columns add up? Is kind of the first step if it's numerical information. For textual information, I'm asking it to show me which quotes did it base that on. Show me 2 or 3 representations in the data that cause you to say that to me. So, wonderful question here. One is still dependent on asking the right questions for the outputs. How can AI ensure we ask the right questions in depths and groups? So I'm going to split that into two parts, one asking AI and then one in groups. So you can certainly say, here are the questions I'm thinking of asking. I am going to be talking to teenage men living in London. How could I change these questions to dig a bit deeper? Can you suggest probes? If you've done, say you're going to do 10 depth interviews, after the first depth interview, you might want to go back and say, this question seemed not to be understood because when I asked it, people did this, this, and this. How can you suggest different ways of asking that question? So that would all be useful there. But asking the right question is also really important when you're talking to ChatGPT. One of the best tricks for asking ChatGPT questions is saying, how could I ask this question clearer? What else do you, ChatGPT, need to know about what I want before you can give me a better answer? And that is also useful. Another question, how helpful would ChatGPT be in embedding the concept of storytelling in the analysis? So I'm actually running a course on this shortly for the Research Society. And there's a whole course, and there's a whole course on doing quant analysis as well. Yes, absolutely, you can do that. And one of the ways that I start the really short 2-minute version of the course is understand your client's business question and what they believe at the moment. Then as you go through the data, whether it's quant or qual or a combination of the two, be asking questions and building a picture or a story with the information that's coming forward, talking then to ChatGPT and saying, is this a story? Is something missing? Can you make suggestions to how to storyfy this? All of those are perfectly possible and straightforward. When using qual transcripts as the source of AI analysis, how, if at all, does one account for the facial expressions? You can't. This is looking at the moment just at the case where you've been sent transcripts and you want to analyze transcripts. So let's say we have got online discussions. We've set up an online discussion board. There's a week's worth of conversations going on. We don't know what the facial conversations were. These days, quite often with a focus group, it's going to be online. We won't, again, get the facial. We are moving into a world where this technology will enable us to look at the facial expressions. However, the new AI Act that's just been passed by the European Parliament may make it illegal to use facial expressions interpreted by AI. It's very much down on biometrics. It's very much down on techniques that would look at people's faces, identify things that had not been said explicitly. So hopefully the technology is going to become even better, but it may be that we won't be enabled to use those aspects. So a couple more questions over here. But for the qual, the sentiments are important too. How well are we dealing with sentiment through the AI? So if you put a whole bunch of sentences into AI and you ask it to assess the sentiment, it's pretty good if you're using the LLM model. If you are using the quantified approach, it's calling things from the Python libraries, and it's still reasonable, but it's not as good. But the most important thing about improving the sentiment analysis is asking better questions with longer answers. And I'll give you one super trivial tip. If you've got a question on a CX study and you've asked people their score on a 0 to 10 scale, and then you've said to them, to the people who scored it 0 to 6, what was wrong with the thing, what was wrong with the service, they might say the person, the counter, the environment. It's really hard to interpret that with sentiment analysis because there isn't any sentiment in that. You've already taken it by contextualizing the question. So you really want to get people to describe your visit to the McDonald's. rather than say what was good or what was bad about McDonald's. If you want to use sentiment analysis, you want to ask for questions that will have sentiment in them. So for content analysis, you find ChatGPT content analysis is actually based on frequency counts or any systematic step-by-step analysis at all. ChatGPT can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Can we rely it, or does it just do a transformer? So it's very much looking at tokens. So for anybody who's not aware, one of the things that all the AI systems do at the moment is they tokenize your text, and it then runs analysis on tokens. And a word spelt correctly and a word spelt wrongly are going to be tokenized normally in the same sort of way and come back. So it's not doing counts at the individual level. As I understand it, in the content analysis, it's going to be counting similar tokens. So these tokenized scripts, they go into vectors through a vectorization process. These segments of vectors are occurring more often. That correlates reasonably well with extracting meaning. How good is ChatGPT at understanding sarcasm? Probably better than most humans I know. When I've fed in a whole set of statements and asked it to score which ones were sarcastic, it was pretty good at that. The problem is that quite often in real life, you will get an email from a colleague and you're looking at it wondering, I wonder if that's sarcastic or not. But I would give you an example of one from many, many years ago in a study. And in the early days of automated coding, so this is probably 15 years ago, it was a verbatim from a travel study, and it was, "Thank you, Lufthansa. I missed my brother's wedding." Well, clearly that should have been coded as bad, and it was coded as good because it went with "Thank you, Lufthansa." You put that into any of the LLMs these days and say, is the meaning positive or negative? It will know that the meaning is negative. So that level is problematic. However, generally, we don't want to be posing data collection situations that generate sarcasm, that generate short answers. We want to be generating answers where there is meaning in the unit we're passing for analysis. So if we're passing 500 words, it's not so important about the context. If we're passing 5 words, the context has to be really clear because there is so little sentiment, so little meaning for it to pick up on. Just a very quick side point. If you ask ChatGPT how many R's there are in strawberry these days, it says 3. Ask it how many R's there are in cranberry. It thinks there are 2 in cranberry, or at least it did yesterday. This is, it's all work in progress at the moment.